Hi, this is Craig Wesco recording for s2p.org, and today we're going to talk about what it means to be a faithful and wise steward. And this comes from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 12, verse 42. So this is Jesus speaking, and he says, "Who then is that faithful and wise steward, whom his master will make ruler over his household, to give them their portion of food in due season? Blessed is that servant whom his master will find so doing when he comes. Truly I say to you that he will make him ruler over all that he has." So basically what Jesus is saying is when he comes back, who will he find doing the things that he instructed? So what a steward is, for those who are unfamiliar, a steward is someone who an owner puts in charge of something, usually an estate, something like that. So let's say you're put in charge of an estate and you're given instructions on what to do while the owner is away. And so if you're faithful to those instructions in doing the things, the upkeep, taking care of the property or whatever you're entrusted with, then you're a faithful steward of what you've been entrusted with. So what is Jesus talking about here? How do we be a faithful and wise steward? So to answer this question, let's look at Genesis 1:28 through 31. So in Genesis 1:28, it says, "Then God blessed them, and God said to them, 'Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth.' And God said, 'See, I have given you every herb that yields seed, which is on the face of all the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed, to you it shall be for food. Also to every beast of the earth, to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth in which there is life, I have given every green herb for food,' and it was so. Then God saw everything he had made, and indeed it was very good." So according to Genesis, this account here, God created us, and in verse 27 it says he created us in his image. And so we're created in like fashion to God himself. Male and female were created, and we're given dominion over the whole earth, and we're instructed how to maintain it. So it says in Genesis 2 verse 15 that he made us to tend and keep the garden. So we're supposed to be these tillers of the ground. We're supposed to be gardeners, growers of food. So we're growing fruit, growing vegetation. And then it says in the passage that we read, Genesis 1 verse 30, that the animals are also eating this herb of the ground. And so part of that dominion that he gives us, that stewardship that he entrusts us with, involves growing food, feeding ourselves with it, and also feeding the animals with this vegetation. So to be a faithful and wise steward would involve taking care of the animals and taking care of the earth as God created us to do. So there's one other passage that I'd like to look at. It's from the book of Revelation, and it's chapter 2, verses 4 through 7, but we're going to read number 5. So Revelation 2 verse 5, it says, "Remember therefore from where you have fallen. Repent and do the first works, or else I will come to you quickly and remove your lampstand from its place unless you repent." So what God's talking about here, he's speaking to the church of Ephesus, which he says all the things that the church is doing right. He says you're doing all these wonderful things, all these great things that I'm happy that you're doing, but there's one thing that you're not doing, one very important thing that you must repent and start doing. And that one thing involves remembering where you've fallen, remember your first love, repent, do the first works, and then it mentions the paradise of God, where you've fallen from, all these references to Eden, the time of the Garden of Eden, in the passage that we read with Genesis. And so what God is saying is, even though you're doing all these wonderful things, there's still one thing that you're not doing. You need to go back to those first works and do the things that I instructed you to do in the very beginning. So to be the faithful and wise stewards that we're called to be, as we're waiting for the Master's return, we should be growing the fruit and the vegetation, feeding ourselves with it, and also feeding the animals with it. So to be caretakers and stewards of the whole earth and all its inhabitants, that's what he instructed us to do from the beginning. And if we're not doing that, then we should repent, which means to turn back to God and resume doing those things that we've been instructed to do. And that's basically what we're called to do. That's what it means to be a faithful and wise steward. So this is Craig Wescoe recording for s2p.org.